Today it's a long one. We're going to try and whiz through this Raya and the Last Dragon cake. I've got a large drum and I'm applying ganache to stick down half of a 10-inch cake. So this is essentially a 10-inch long by 5-inch rectangle. I'm just making sure there's enough room at the front. I'm then adding another layer. This is now a full half of my 10-inch cake. I'm then using another layer from the other half to make it 3 layers high. I now only have one rectangle left, which I've cut again in half to use as this back ledge. I hope you're still with me so far. Then the remaining half that's missing here, I've cut into 4 equal squares and I'm sticking them to the front and layering them with buttercream to make 2 small parts of the stand. So what you're looking at here now is a full 10-inch square cake, just cut to create a completely different shape. Then you want to coat the whole thing in a layer of chocolate ganache to seal in the sponge and add stability as it sets. Your first layer can be a little rough as we're going to add a second layer once it's set, and I'm using my Pro Froster and several other smoothers just to keep scraping round and getting the sides, back and tops as straight as I can. I haven't gone too precise with this as the majority is going to be covered with details and it was a heck of a hot day outside. I'm now covering the whole thing in white sugar paste, and as I just mentioned, it was super hot outside, so you might see a little bit of cracking around the corners. This isn't typical for this sugar paste, but once the sugar paste gets warm and super soft in its packet, you'll find it slightly more difficult to cover with as it crusts on the outer layer much more quickly. I'm then taking my Dresden tool and marking in some wood grain, and then individual wooden panels all around the whole cake. Then I'm taking my airbrush and some brown colour, spraying the whole thing all over. Again, this doesn't have to be neat, it's just our base layer, which then gets sprayed with a spray bottle and wiped back off. The purpose of this is once you drench it with water, the colour will seep into all those wood grain lines you made and make them even darker. Then you can go back in and colour it more deeply and evenly with the airbrush. Once you're happy with that, I've switched over to black and I'm adding in lots of deeper shadows to grunge up the market stall, down the sides of ledges and where shadows might sit. To cover the board, I'm just laying this out and marking in how big that middle part needs to be and pushing it all into position. Again, with it being a hot day, everything just took longer and was more difficult than usual. Luckily, we're adding wood grain to cover up any imperfections. You just want to score over the whole board and then use a ruler to press in some deeper boardwalk lines. For the tablecloths, I've rolled out some paler brown and I'm just using a texture mat. You can use any pattern you like, just pressing it on and then cutting out some random shapes to drape over the stall. I'm adding in some smaller ones to the seating areas at the front and different colours and different patterns. Now to start the roof, take 4 kebab sticks and place them right down to the bottom of the board in the 4 corners of the main rectangle. Trim them with some cutters so that the front sticks are slightly shorter than the back ones if you want a leaning roof. Speaking of the roof, I'm using my favourite stuff, foam core. I'm just marking how big I want my roof, resting it on the sticks, and then I'm using my quilting ruler to join those lines up and make a nice even rectangle. I love my quilting ruler, and everything is linked below if you want to grab your own. Follow this line again with your scalpel, cut it out and double check it against your sticks. Once you're happy, gently push down on the sticks until it passes through one outer layer of the foam core. This will leave little holes in each corner so you know where to add your glue. Dab a small blob of hot glue onto each of the holes, and once it's not drippy, push the roof back onto your sticks. The glue will set, take hold, and the roof will be nice and secure. Just make sure that your glue doesn't drip whatsoever. Starting with Raya's boots, I've got a pale brown tapered sausage and I'm bending the smaller end into the front of a boot, squeezing in a heel at the back and slowly rocking in an ankle shape. With a scalpel, mark in the heel and run your finger across the larger part to make the heel stand out a bit more. Raya's boots have a tiny little point up at the end which you just need to tap up with your fingers. Apologies for most of this being off camera, I haven't quite got my cameras where I need them in the studio just yet. Work in progress. Her pants are dark green and it's just a sausage bent in half which I'm placing on the front left square of the market stall. Grab one of your boots and stick it to the floor and then join the pants up with the top of the boot, marking in crease lines so it looks like a lot of material being pushed down inside the boot. Do the same for the other one. For extra detail, I've cut a strip which I'm lining up with the top of the boots and then wrapping it slightly towards the front of her pants. Her torso is a pale mustard colour which is slightly wider at the top than at the bottom, and then pushing a kebab stick right down the centre and into the seat to hold her up straight. With a Dresden tool, marking the pattern of her top, which is almost like a pleated wrap over top. Just follow some pictures online to get it how you want. She also has a little brown belt, which is just a strip of brown paste placed around her waist, and a very short jacket in the same colour. Mine was just a rectangle, and by eye I can see the fronts are going to overlap a little bit too much, so I'm just taking some scissors and snipping them down so it looks much more like a short, open jacket. Her arm starts out as a sausage with the end flattened, and I'm cutting out a tiny triangle to create a thumb. If you want a slower, deeper look at hands, you can check out my sitting princess tutorial. But you want to cut in the fingers and gently roll them between your fingers to round them out and make them a little longer. Once you've done that, roll the wrist between your fingers to thin it out, and then you want to roll the whole arm to make that tapering more gradual. Chop the arm down a little smaller, and as you can see, she's going to be leaning on this hand. You want to do this now by pushing the wrist back on itself. Once the arm is straightened out, it will look more natural. Place the hand into position and pull the arm straight up to the shoulder. Chop off anything too long with a scalpel and just glue it with water. Using the same colour, roll a small sausage of paste down the kebab stick and cut it shorter for her neck. Her other arm is made in the same way, but I bent it at the elbow so she can hold the blue crystals she has been hunting for. This is just a ball of blue paste that I haven't quite mixed the colour fully in, so it's got a marble appearance. Stick the fingers around the ball and finish off the tops of the arms with a small semicircle of brown. With a pale brown, cut some rectangles and wrap them around her forearms, adding in some material crease details. Our head starts as an oval and I'm running my finger across the top third for where her eyes are going to sit. I usually place a nose on, but we're going to push one in here as I added quite a bit of Talon due to the heat, and now I've left it too long and it's hardened up quite a bit. So we're just going to work with what we have. I'm just gently teasing and pressing in a nose and smoothing out the eye area. Add in some nostrils and a small smile. We don't have to go too heavy on the lip detail here, just gently pushing in a lower lip and smoothing out any tool lines with your thumb. The rest we can create with paint. I'm also scoring in her eyes, which you can either cut out and fill with white paste or paint it like I'm doing. This is just white powder mixed with water and I'm following the shape. I'm adding small brown balls for the iris, which you can do again with the pupils in black, but I'm just painting it in as I had my paint out ready for the eyeliner and eyelashes. Also add in some eyebrows. I can only ever draw one, the other one always looks wonky. I've now switched to pink paint, which is just gel watered down for her lips, and I'm adding dry pink lustre to her cheeks, nose and forehead. The base of her hair starts as a very dark brown oval, which I'm just sticking to her back and pulling up to a point on top of her head. Snip this down, press down any points, and then start adding tapered sausages to give her more shape around the face. Before we forget, add 2 tiny white balls for catch lights. After all that hard work adding the hair, we're going to now chop the entire top of her head off at an angle towards the back, before then re-adding a tiny little point to the centre of it. This is just to help give her hat some shape when we add this textured circle over the top. Then for the very top of the hat, it's just a small cone which I've pushed over the same texture mat and then lined with a thin strip of paste. To hold that big floppy hat into position, I'm just sticking some acupuncture needles into her head and then laying the brim on top until it dries. A little bit of prep is needed here in making the lanterns. You can make absolutely any shape you like. You'll see me here creating 2 different shapes, and you just want short pieces of wire with a hook bent into the end. Push this through the centre of your lanterns and pull them just enough so that the hook disappears back inside it. You can hide the wire if you like with a little circle of paste on the bottom. Leave these to dry in lots of different colours, shapes and sizes. I made these quite late in the day, so I've left them overnight to dry. It's now the next morning, and as you can see, pretty much any shape goes. I also prepped some extra details which I had to skip filming due to time restrictions. I hope you don't mind, but I think they're pretty easy enough to replicate without watching me do it. They are essentially textured circles with rims around the edge for trays, balls of paste slightly squeezed up into a neck and chopped for baskets, little balls with straight lids and handles, which I'm sure you should be able to make with no problem at all. Just time and the heat was a little bit against me with this tutorial, and as you can tell, it's already much longer than my usual tutorials, so apologies for that. Next up is the all-important last dragon. She starts as a very long blue tapered sausage, and I'm just sticking her to the second market square, pushing a kebab stick right down into the centre and into the base to hold her body up. The rest of the body can then just get curled and coiled around the market stall, and I'm sticking the end of the tail to the wood so I can add her tail fins a little bit easier. Her arms start in a similar way to a human hand with a flattened end, but I'm only marking in 3 digits. Keep these quite short and chubby, and you can create a fourth one by pushing the paste down to create a lip and gently teasing and pulling it out into a 4th digit. You can push this to either side depending on whether it's the right or left leg. Thin out the wrist and taper down the whole arm. Hold the hand again and bend the wrist straight up and pull in a tiny pointed elbow. Stick this into position with the water and mark in tiny holes on the end of each digit for adding claws later on. The second arm is also bent and it's laid straight out in front, marking in some lines on the elbows. Back legs are only slightly different in that they don't have a 4th digit, just a heel. For her head, it starts as a ball, and I'm starting to gently tease out a small snout. Press the eye areas in either side, slowly working them deeper with your thumbs. Press the snout down until you've got a slightly angled chin. Press in either side of the eyes to try and thin out the head and pull out some cheeks. If your head starts to get a little bit long looking, you can rock it back and forth on your mat to shorten it back down. Marking a smile with the Dresden tool all across the lower part of the snout and pull it up into the cheeks. Gently push up the bottom lip towards the snout. Again, marking eyes with the Dresden tool and small holes for nostrils. I decided to paint the eyes again, but feel free to fill yours with white paste if that works better for you. I'm adding in purple iris circles and then painting the outers of them in a deeper purple paint. Black circles for the pupils and tiny white balls for catchlights, and then going in with that black gel paint for eyeliner and eyelashes. I went a little bit heavy on the eyebrows here, I can just never get them right. Gently push the head down the stick to sit on the neck. Don't worry if there's a gap or it doesn't quite meet because it's going to be covered in fur. Dampen around the head and the front and start squashing some lilac sausages to place on the neck. Lay them up until it's all covered and start marking in deep lines with the Dresden tool to merge them. Once the neck is done, start moving up the back of the head, and as you get closer to the top, bend some of them into unruly waves and curls. She also has 2 horns, a larger blue one with a smaller one in front of it. Make up some blue paints using gel and water and a little bit of white dust and start adding it around the hair. I'm also adding a deeper blue all down her back. In the same lilac, we're adding the ends of the tail, and now you can see why it's much easier to add them against the wooden stall. I'm also painting the details in blue on these, as well as the lines and shapes on the horn. I've cut out this long wavy strip which I'm just sticking down the back. This is easy enough to do when the paint is still wet. Using a very deep blue, I'm making these super tiny cones to stick in the holes for claws. Now we can start adding our details, and this is a perfect time to place your baskets to hide any imperfections around the stall. I'm just sticking all the details down with water. If yours have dried a lot, you can mix up some royal icing to help keep them in place. And then just making various details for the stall, such as these green leaves sitting in some of the trays, and also some food such as this little fish. You can really go to town with the details here if you like. You could add individual scales and fins, but sometimes you have to know your deadlines and you need to know where to stop. Now for those lanterns, you want to push the wire up through the foam core, place it at the height you want and snip the wire down. Curl it back over into a hook and push it back down through the foam core to keep it nice and secure. Then just bend your wire to keep the lantern hanging straight. Do this for all your lanterns, placing them at different heights and colour combinations. These are now nice and secure and not going to move anywhere. You can also see I added more food to the stall, such as baguettes and trinkets, which again I'm hoping you can create easily enough. Add some piping gel to the top of the roof and lay over some pale straw coloured paste. With the Dresden tool, pull downwards for the straw roof. It will take a while for you to make it all the way to the top. I then did the birthday girl's name by cutting out letters, and I'm finishing off by shading the straw roof and also some of the bits on the table. And we are finally done. I hope you managed to pick something up from this tutorial, as it was quite a long one and got lots of details. Remember, you can go into much more detail if you want. Raya has a buckle on her belt and also some details on her boots. But like I said, you just sometimes have to know when to stop and what you've still got to get done versus your deadline. If you haven't seen this film yet, you can go and take a look at Disney Plus, as it's one of the newer ones called Raya and the Last Dragon. This scene is based on the area of Talon, which she visits and meets a rather mischievous baby. I just loved the colours and atmosphere of the scene and wanted to bring that to cake. I hope you enjoyed this one. Please do leave me a comment below and I'll see you again next week. Bye guys.